Okay. Again, Ms. Mobley, we're going to start way back, and I've got a
Hmm.
lot of questions, and we'll take some breaks. So, um, why did your parents leave Mississippi and move to Chicago?
My father was looking for better living conditions, and we had relatives in the city, and they were constantly writing about the opportunities and sometime in late 23 my father left Mississippi and came to Chicago. He was employed by the Corn Products Refining Company in Argo, Illinois.
So when he left, he was part of a lot of people. The great, what they call the Great Migration. He was part of a lot of people who were leaving Mississippi in the South, wasn't he?
Yes, yes, he was. Um, my family was kind of late leaving, but on my mother's side, my aunt had come to Chicago. My aunt Mamie, the oldest sister, and some other relatives, and they were the ones that were urging my mother and dad to leave the South and come to Illinois, come to Chicago.
Um, why? What did they hope to find in Chicago? What did they leave, and what in Mississippi, and what did they hope to find in Chicago? All these people who were leaving.
Well, they were looking almost as the Jews were looking for the promised land. Chicago was a land of promise, and they thought that milk and honey was everywhere, and so it was a lot of excitement leaving the South, leaving the cotton fields, leaving the uh, place where you had to get off the sidewalk if you as you approached a white woman particularly, and holding your head down. You could hold your head up in Chicago. So this was very, very exciting.
Great. You talk about your life in Chicago. As a very young adult. I mean, you were working for the government. I believe. I mean, you had a middle class life, did you not?
I suppose you would say that. In fact, I have learned in these latter years that my son was thought of as the rich kid. And, well, I thought we lived a very ordinary life. I was the second black person in Argo, Illinois to get off my knees and start working for the federal government. I had worked with the Coffee School of Aeronautics for about 2 years, and that's where a lot of the Tuskegee Airmen first became pilots. And during the war, they became known as the Tuskegee whatever. I can't remember their exact title. But I worked with those fellows out at 87th and Harlem before there was even transportation there. There were no roads leading to 87th and Harlem. And I remember they would pick me up every morning at 87th Street, and we would bump, bump, bump until we got to the airport. They would pick me up at 63rd and Harlem, and we just picked our way out to 87th and Harlem. That gave me, that I was looked upon with a lot of respect, because I was no longer cleaning houses and babysitting and washing and ironing. And believe me, my wages were about $7 a week, but I earned every cent of it. I had the big house to clean up. I had the children to babysit and to feed and to bathe and to play with. I had the washing to do, the ironing to do. The responsibility of the entire family was mine. And I must say that I did a remarkable job. I was a very thorough little housekeeper.
So your move to government work was a real step up.
My move to government work was very historic because no, none of the black people were able to take the civil service exam. It wasn't even open to us. But my best girlfriend, Ollie Williams, I had gotten her a job with the Coffee School of Aeronautics, and we would ride together every morning. In fact, she would have breakfast in my house in Argo, and then my mother would take us to 63rd in Harlem, and the bus would pick us to go to 87th in Harlem. And 2 mornings she didn't show, and I couldn't understand what had happened to Ollie. I called her, and somebody told me that Ollie was at work. I said, no, she didn't come to work yesterday or today. And they told me, oh, she has a civil service job. Who? Okay, so when I got a chance to speak with Ollie, I wanted to know what is going on and why didn't you tell me? And I don't know, she really never gave me a satisfactory explanation. But I told her, so will you tell me where you take that exam? And she was a little hedgy about telling me, but I got it out of her. And I told my mother where I wanted to go. I went back to my job, and I told the owners, there was Cornelius Coffee was the head of everything, and his wife, Willa Brown Coffee, who was an aviatrix, she really ran the show. She ran him and everything else. And I asked for a raise. And she told me, she said, well, I have to tell you, wages are frozen. And when she told me that, it kind of galvanized something within me. And I asked for a day off. And I told him I wouldn't be in tomorrow, whatever day that was. And so the next morning, I told my mother, we're going and take the civil service exam. And Mom would usually try to grant my wishes, and we went. I have no idea where it was. But we went in, and I took that exam. I went through the written and the oral with flying colors. But I had to pass the typing test. And by accident, I had gotten into the shorthand typing aspect of high school life. And I knew how to type. I knew the keyboard, but I guess I was as nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. And I didn't pass the test. I didn't get the 45 words a minute. But the young lady in charge, who was also black, and that was a shock to me, Thelma Frazier was her name. She told me, she said, you go home and see a movie tonight and come back in the morning and pass this test. You can type. I can tell that. Oh my God. She said, go to the movies. She didn't know what a key, something she had touched, because going to the movies was something that I was not allowed to do. Even though I was grown, I had been married. My son was almost 2 years old. This was in 1943. Lewis had gone into service. That was my husband. We had come to a parting of the ways, and he had been given a choice to go to jail or go to the Army, and he decided to go to the Army. And but I still couldn't go to the show because Mama was still the boss. Now, I was 21 years old, I guess. But anyway, I told Mama that I had to go to the show tonight. I said, the lady in charge told me to go to the show and to relax and come back and pass the test. And I was so excited about going to the show. And Mama gave in. She told me, okay, you can go to the show. And I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I can't remember what it was, but that was the best show I've ever seen in my life, because I was watching it without fear of being discovered and given a licking when I got home. Because Mama would apply the strap or switch or whatever she found handy. And I went in the next morning and I zoomed through that test. I mean, it was really a matter of post-hypnotic suggestion, I would say, because I went through that test with flying colors and I was hired. And the funny thing about it was I got a bigger salary than my friend got. She started working at $1,220 a year, and I got hired at $1,440. So that made me, oh my goodness, I was on the real high step.
Mm-hmm. So,
and go ahead.
I'm sorry. Do you need some water? Want some water?
Maybe I should.
Great.
Should we cut?
Yeah, let's cut for 1 second. So at that point, you and your son, you kind of have this had a very middle class life, a TV and those kind of things. Where now you.
No, we didn't have a TV, but I'll tell you what we did have. We had a telephone, and that was that put us in a class all by ourselves. There were about 2 or 3 families on our block with telephones, and we were the first ones. The next thing, we had a brand new Ford automobile. Now, it wasn't brand new then. We bought that Ford in 1933. It was a 1933 Ford Deluxe sedan with 4 doors, but it had no heater and no air conditioner. It was just a stripped-down Ford. And but when my mother bought that car, she had the lights turned off, she had the gas turned off, and she disconnected the telephone. We had to put everything we had into paying the $33 a month car note. And it was predicted that Alma was going to lose that car and lose that home she's living in. And instead of losing it, my mother paid the last 3 months ahead of time. She took the man $99 before she could drive back to the house, which was less than 3 blocks. The news was on my street that Alma had paid for that automobile. Everything you did was news, particularly with some families. And the Mallory family, which was Earlene's, where her roots, and the Gaines family, that was my mother. And there was one more, Ruby Johnson. Those 3 women, what they did was the pattern for everyone else to follow. But nobody ever bought that brand new automobile. My mother was the only one. And she was the only driver. My stepfather did not drive. But being church people, usually they were dealing with church work or school work. My mother was quite a community person, because as long as I was in school, she was in school. And so was Ruby Johnson, and Rosie Mallory couldn't be there because she worked. But my mom would report back to her. So they had their little network going.
Let me ask you another question, because I want to. Well, you'll be tired out by the time we get finished with this. Probably we're getting her glasses all the time.
Okay, Stanley, if you look at the.
And I have speed.
Okay, Miss Mobley, talk to me a little bit about the joy at the birth of your son.
Oh my goodness, we were all excited because I was the oldest grandchild, and I was getting ready to bring a son into the world, and I was kind of, well, everything kind of centered around Mamie. I was the focal point in the family because I was a smart little kid, and my mother had raised me real good in the church, and I was excelling in school. And when time came for me to bring forth the child, everybody was focused in on Mamie and this baby. Well, I went to the hospital, and on a Wednesday morning, but my son wasn't born until Friday, sometime Friday, and I was having difficulty with the birth. He was a breech baby, and they put me in this room, and they kind of forgot about me, and the water broke, and when the water broke, I began to get okay. I was no longer struggling. And when one nurse passed by my room, and I was up helping the other lady in the bed that was in the room, and she was very vocal about her birth. She was cursing her husband, and she was everything, and screaming, and I was trying to calm her down, and that's when they grabbed me and took me into delivery. And all the time that I'd been begging them to come and see about me, they'd just been passing by. But this time I was whisked into the room, and I thought the baby was coming, but it didn't feel like the baby. It felt like something else, and I called for a bedpan, and the doctor told me the baby is going to come out the same way he went in. And I blushed. I mean, I could feel myself turning red. I don't know how I thought the doctor thought the baby got where he was, but the idea of him saying that, that just kind of got under my skin. And then the next thing I knew, they were shooting me with a needle. They gave me, what did they give me? Ether. They shot me with a needle, then they put a cone over my mouth. And I didn't want that thing over my face. And, well, the next thing I knew, I was waking up. The baby had been delivered, but it was a forceps delivery. And when they brought the baby to me, I saw scars here, scars on his nose. He was kind of scarred up a bit. And I said, "Oh, what an ugly baby." And Emmett jerked his head. I mean, a wee baby, just hours old. But it looks like that he looked up at me and he began to cry. And oh my God, I said, "Oh," I pulled him to me. I said, "Honey, Mother loves you." I was trying to make up for what I had said because it seemed that he had reacted to what I said. And I didn't see him anymore. I don't know whether he might have been 2 weeks old, he might have been a month old. But I became, I had an infection following the birth. And so they had to keep us, we were isolated from one another. They kept him in the hospital for 2 weeks because the umbilical cord had wrapped around his left hand and his right knee, and that's why he was coming breech. Well, they got that straightened out. His knee was swollen, his arm was swollen. And when they got him passable, is what I used to call it, they sent him home, but they kept me. Then they brought him back to the hospital and sent me home. So we missed one another again. He was a month old before I really got a chance to have him as my own. And I was so disappointed because my little baby had turned from a little white baby with blue eyes and blonde hair to a little brown baby. He wasn't really brown, but he was so much darker. And I wondered, was that my baby? And Mama said, oh, yes, this is your baby. Because the comment had been made at his birth that give him 30 days and he'll look the way he's supposed to look. And certainly enough, in 30 days, he was Emmett Till. Well, we got along wonderfully together, except that I did have to put him on a formula. Wasn't able to breastfeed him. My milk was either it wasn't enough, it was something wrong.
Let me interrupt you, because I think that you're gonna tire out by the time we get through.
Okay, interrupt when you want to.
We got so much detail. If that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Because I want to jump ahead, and where I guess the next thing would be Emmett's father's death, and I want to keep this in the time period.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But so, are we rolling?
Yes.
So, tell me, how you heard it and when did you hear about how you heard about Emmett's father's death?
I received a telegram from the U.S. Department of the Army, I guess, and they told me that your husband, Louis Till, died May and the date. And I just looked at that a couple of days ago. But, and they said the cause of death, willful misconduct. And that was all they told me. Finally, they
Be honest with me in the comments. What do you think willful misconduct meant back then?
sent me his what few possessions he had, which consisted mainly of a ring. I can't remember anything else that they sent me, but they sent something. And I put the ring away because I had no use for the ring, and I wasn't ready to give it to, Emmett couldn't use it. He was too tiny. And he was only about 3 or 4 or 5 years old at the most. So the ring was put away for another day. And I began to ask the Army what happened. And they never would respond to me. They would not give me. They told me that they had told me all that they were permitted to tell me in the telegram. And that's all I ever heard until Senator Eastland got the information that I had been trying to get. But I was also reading an article where his buddies, some of his Army buddies, said that Louis Till was railroaded.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. Because I want to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, tell me how. So, you found out your husband had passed, and you put the ring away. How did Emmett get the ring?
The day Emmett left for Mississippi, the day before he left for Mississippi, I brought the ring out and told him the story behind the ring. I told him it was his father's ring. I didn't go into any details. He knew that his dad was dead, but I never tried to tell him anything about his father's death because I didn't know anything. And I hadn't even told him that his dad and I were separated. So Emmett just knew that he had a father in the Army, and this was his ring, and he died while he was in the service. And as Emmett was, well, I guess you just want me to talk about the ring.
Okay. Let me start the story over if you can.
Should I go wider again?
No, this is fine.
Stay there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just tell me the story and kind of give me the short version because you were kind of going off on probably something that's too much, but it's a great story. The day before Emmett was going to Mississippi, I gave him the ring. If you can tell me, that would be great. So I'll ask you again. How did Emmett get the ring?
I gave him the ring one day before he left going to Mississippi. And he was very excited about the ring. I mean, he really appreciated that ring. And before he left, he started running up the steps to board the train because we could hear the whistle blowing. And he was going to join Papa Mose and Wheeler Parker on the train. And we were at 63rd Street. The train originated at 12th Street. And he was running up the steps to try to make it to the train. And I said, Emmett, Bo, I called him Bo. I said, where are you going? You haven't kissed me goodbye. And how do I know I'll ever see you again? And he looked at me and he said, oh, Mama. He kind of scolded me for saying something like that. But he turned around, he came back, and he kissed me goodbye. And he said, here, take this. He pulled his watch off and gave it to me. He said, I won't need this where I'm going. I said, what about your ring? He said, oh.
Different type of goodbye. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments.
I'm going to show it off to the fellows. And with that, he was up the steps and on his way to get on the train.
Great. Thank you. What kind of boy was Emmett? What was he like?
Well, to me, he was perfection. We mothers don't see much wrong with our sons. And I only saw Emmett in the evening. I was at work during the daylight hours when he was up playing and doing other things that little boys do. But my mother never had any complaints about Emmett. She never told me that she spanked him. I mean, it seemed that he was just a kid that did what he was supposed to do. And she took him to church with her, so he was brought up in a church environment. My stepfather thought he was perfection. Mr. Gaines, he was the most wonderful stepfather in the world. But one day we came home from church, Mother and I, and Bo was straddled Papa Tom, and he was taking his finger, putting them in his nose, and Papa Tom tears were coming out of his eyes. And when I saw what Bo was doing, and Papa was letting him do it, I grabbed him and I whacked him on his rear end. I said, you don't do that to Papa Tom. And Papa Tom raised up and he cursed me for everything he could think of because I had hit that baby. The one and only time that he ever showed any ill will towards me, but he told me to keep my hands off of that boy. So, and the kid had him crying. He knew better. But he didn't do that anymore, incidentally.
You should zoom in a little bit.
Sure.
What kind of I know a lot of times, single mothers and young, and you're also a young mother, and their kids are very close. What was Emmett helpful around the house? Were you guys close?
Well, at age 10, we had moved to Chicago. We had gone to Detroit, and I had left Detroit and returned to Chicago for the first time. I'd lived in Argo all my life. And there were just the two of us at 64th and St. Lawrence. But I had moved my uncle, my father's oldest brother, and his wife in on the first floor so that Emmett would never come home to an empty house. There was always somebody there to receive him and that he had to account to. And at age 10, we were 10 when we moved from Detroit back to Chicago. And we moved in about November. And later on the following year, Emmett told me, he said, if you can go out and make the money I can take care of the house. And I dumped the house on him. I mean, it was just like I was carrying a load, and I laid it down. And that kid really took care of my house. He swept, he mopped, he helped me to lay rugs, he helped me to lay tile. I mean, he was an able-bodied help around the house. Later he told me, he said, "Now, Mama, I could do the laundry too." And I went down and made sure that he knew how to operate the wringer machine. And then I forgot the laundry. He did the laundry. Then he decided that he could pay the bills and shop the groceries. And I remember the first time I gave him $100 to go and pay bills. And I was shaking like a leaf on a tree because $100 was a lot of money. And we didn't have checkbooks at that time. Didn't even know the use of a checkbook. But Emmett went down to State and Madison. He paid a bill that I had at one of the leading stores there, and then coming back south, he stopped at Sears and the Fair store and paid the bills there. He came all the way back to 63rd between Cottage Grove and Stony Island, and he paid my telephone bill, my light bill, my gas bill, and he had about 17 cents left. And he put all the paid bills on the dresser along with the change. And he let me know that he knew that was his, but he would wait for me to give it to him. He wouldn't just take it. And my aunt had given him permission to be out a couple doors away. And that's where he was. And when he thought I was home, he came home. And I complimented him on what a beautiful job he had done and even brought me the change. He said, "Well, I left it there." He said, "But I earned that." I said, "You certainly did." And I gave him that and an extra $1. And that just thrilled him all the way down to his toes. He was very grateful. And then his cooking. He had two things that he liked: fried corn and pork chops. And when he would shop, he would buy 2 packages of pork chops. And one was for me, one was for him. And he would cook these pork chops in separate skillets because he wanted to make sure that he got his 3 or 4 or however many, and that I didn't get one of his by mistake. I mean, he really divided those chops up. Then he would open 2 cans of cream-style corn. And then he would come with the pepper shaker. And you have never eaten black corn in your life. That corn would be black with pepper. And I would be eating and drinking because my mouth was on fire, and I tried to discourage the use of so much pepper. I don't know if I ever succeeded or not. But to this day, I am very, very careful with the way I use black pepper.
Okay, let's cut for a minute.
Sure.
Everybody's cell phones are off, right?
Yes, sir.
Let me see.
Have a very one.
We don't want to hear one.
Mine is
Okay, ready? Whoops.
Whoops.
I turned mine off. It was on. Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Tell me when.
I'm ready. Roll.
Okay, I'm rolling. And Mike's in, so speak.
Just go.
Ms. Mobley, tell me the story of how Emmett happened to go south.
Papa Mose was in town. He had come into Chicago to bury a friend of his. And while he was here, it was decided that 2 of his grandsons would return home with him for the summer. Well, Emmett was very close to the grandson that lived in Argo, Illinois, because we lived next door to one another. And Emmett, even though Wheeler was 2 years older, he and Wheeler were just, they were almost soulmates. And when Emmett found out that Wheeler was going, he turned the heat on me to let him go. we had already planned our vacation, and we were supposed to be leaving for Detroit, Michigan to pick up a cousin, and then we were going to drive to Omaha, Nebraska and visit with her relatives there. And Emmett had been promised that he could even drive on the highway. We were going to let him try his driving skills on the highway, and which I did not agree to, but that's what Jean had told him, and I wouldn't go against Jean. And while we were almost in the midst of getting ready, when Emmett left going to Mississippi, something happened to me and I became immobilized. I couldn't walk. I was feeling fine, but my legs just wouldn't support my body. And by the time I got back home from the train station, I was forced to crawl up the steps. And so that persisted for a week. But in order for Emmett to go to Mississippi, my mother and I felt it would be necessary to speak to Papa Mose and give him some words of caution for the boys. 3 Chicago boys going to Mississippi, and they're going to be with at least 3 or 4 of Papa Mose's boys, and it was time to really zero in and help these Chicago boys survive the summer. And they laughed at us. They thought we were so silly, Mama and me, for us to be coming over about this one little chick. Well, that's all we had. We had one little chick. The rest of them had many sons, many daughters. They were loaded with relatives, nieces, nephews, etc. But we just had the one. And the argument that Emmett used to get me, that made me cave in, he said, well, Mama, how is it that you and Mamu could take 2 of Uncle Mose's daughters and raise them? And we had taken Thelma when she was in 3rd grade, and she was in 2nd year teacher's college then. Laretha, we took her in 7th grade, and she had finished high school and had gone to work to help Thelma make it through Chicago Teachers College. And Emmett couldn't understand how I could take them, and they hadn't even been back to the South to see their parents, and yet you won't let me go for a week. And that really got to my mother, and it got to me. So we were both coming over to the daughter's house, to Moses Wright's daughter's house, who was the mother of Curtis Jones. And we were going to meet up over there. I didn't know she was coming. She didn't know I was coming. But I was parking on the east side of the street, and she was parking on the west side of the street in front of their house. And that's when they laughed. Oh, they thought that was the most ridiculous thing, how concerned we were about this one little kid. And we laughed at one another. I didn't know you were coming. Well, I certainly didn't know you were coming, but we arrived at the same hour. And we went in and we cautioned Papa Mose and we talked to the boys. And I said, well, we need to pray about this. And Mama said, well, I've already prayed. And we finally gave our consent. And then we had to stop, we had to unpack and repack Emmett because I had his things, they were kind of interpacked. And when we got all through, we were supposed to meet Papa Mose down at the 12th Street station, but we just couldn't make it. So we went to the 63rd Street station, and that's where Emmett and I parted. And that's when my legs gave out. Nothing wrong with my knees, ankles, anything. but the strength went out of my legs and they would not function. I don't even know how I got back to my car, but I did. But by the time I got home, I was reduced to crawling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can we get tighter?
Get tighter, sure.
Do you need some water?
I don't know.
Okay. What was it that you told Emmett and the boys about Mississippi?
I let them know that Mississippi was not Chicago. And when you go to Mississippi, you're living by an entirely different set of rules. It is yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, yes, sir, and no, sir. And, Bo, if you see a white woman coming down the street, you get off the sidewalk and drop your head. Don't even look at her as she passes by. Now, I was really going to extremes. I didn't know that that was really the custom down there. But I have read since then that that was the custom. You get off the sidewalk and you lower your head. You don't look a white person in the eye. And I guess I made things as scary as I could possibly make them. And I just had to instill it in him, what to do and what not to do.
Great. Now the story about Emmett and having a wallet. Did you buy the wallet for him? Where did he get this wallet?
Yes, I bought that wallet at. It was a store that had been. It was a theater that had been converted into a store. It was formerly the Southtown Theater, which was a beautiful place. I mean, it was so magnificent. And it was near 63rd and Halstead. It was on 63rd Street, about a block east of Halstead. And it had become almost a junk store. I mean, it almost looked like Jewtown. We have a section in Chicago that we used to call Jewtown, and that's where all the stuff was out and picked over and rummaged through and whatnot. But we had to get that wallet. We had to get several other things that he needed. And we had quite a problem selecting a wallet. At that time, there were pictures of movie stars in the wallets and a little biographical sketch of them. And Emmett had Hedy Lamarr in one hand and Dorothy Lamour in the other hand, and he couldn't decide which one he wanted. But if I remember correctly, I think he chose Hedy Lamarr. I don't really know. But anyway, whichever one, that was the picture that was in the wallet. And that was the picture.
Be honest in the comments. Which one do you think you would have chosen?
That Milam and Bryant claimed Emmett said was his girlfriend. But that was a movie star.
Okay, let's cut. You gotta be quiet. Change. Okay, so talk to me about
Speed.
You and Emmett went shopping for the trip.
Yes, in order for Emmett to take this trip, we had to pick up a few items in order for him to go. And one of these was a wallet. And we had gone to this store, and we were searching through the wallets, and he selected two. One had a picture of Hedy Lamarr, one had Dorothy Lamour. And both of these were sort of his favorites. And he was having a lot of difficulty deciding which one to take. But if I remember correctly, he took the one with Hedy Lamarr's picture in it. And that's a picture that he had in his wallet that Milam and Bryant said was his girlfriend.
Okay. Great.
Keep rolling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now he was going to visit Mose Wright, right? That's who he's going to stay with. If you can give me, it doesn't have to be long, but a quick sketch of, what was Mose Wright like? What kind of man was he?
Moses Wright was a preacher, And he was a sanctified preacher, and he pastored a couple of churches because they didn't have enough preachers to go around. So quite often, one minister would take over 2 or 3 churches. And he had the one there at Money, and I don't know where the other one was. But he was a hard-working man. He was small and wiry, but could that old man work? And he knew how to work his crew. His children, his grandchildren, or whoever was around, they all went to the field. So his boys were accustomed to field work. Emmett wasn't, but Emmett would help Aunt Elizabeth at the house. When she would get up and fix breakfast, he would stay until the breakfast dishes were done.
Much of these different Emmett Till stories. Let me know in the comments, what kind of person do you think Emmett Till was?
And they would go to the garden and select what they were going to have for dinner. And when all of those pots were on, then Emmett would go to the field. He would usually go after the boys and Papa Mose came in for their lunch. Then he would go back with them then. And another thing that really excited her, Emmett could handle the washing machine, and he would wash every day. Well, she had a lot of people to wash for. In addition to her own family, which was about 7 or 8 people, then she had 2 or 3 babies she was taking care of, babysitting. And then her stepdaughters would bring their laundry over, and she would wash for them. I mean, it was an ongoing wash cycle. And by Emmett being accustomed to using a washing machine, he could do a lot of that work for her. And that just thrilled her to death, as you will see in the letters that she wrote.
Let me ask you a question about the letters, too. Can we come one second?
Mike send,
Okay.
speak.
You talked about that you talked to Emmett and the boys before they went south, and told you told Emmett to put his head down and not to look people in the eye. What did Emmett think of all this? Did he take this seriously?
Now I wonder if he did. He seemed to be taking it all in what I was telling him, but there was something about him that made me think he thought I was exaggerating, which I was. I was trying to exaggerate. If I could go high enough, things could soak into his head that you have to be very careful. And now he told me that he understood, and that's all I could go by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now the other boys were accustomed to going to Mississippi, not Wheeler, but the other boy, Curtis. And oddly enough, Willie Mae, his mother, would not let him go when Papa Mose, Bo, and Wheeler went. He didn't go until the following Saturday. Maybe he arrived a couple hours before the men forced their way in.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm asking a lot of follow-up questions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Emmett was it infant paralysis that he had? And he had a stutter?
He had polio.
Polio.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, Emmett was a kid who loved to play. He was outdoors. And we noticed that every night his temperature would go up. Every day he was as fine as could be. But the minute night came on, that temperature would soar. So I told my mother, I said, Mom, you take him to the doctor and find out what this is all about. And that's when he was diagnosed as having polio. And the polio never stopped him during the day, but it stopped him every night. And when he was, when he had recovered from polio, we noticed that his speech was not the way it had been. I don't know if what was affected that made him have a stutter, but the speech impediment never lessened. I mean, it just went on and on. And we began to take him to doctors and clinics and what have you. And after over a year of this, we were told at one of Chicago's finest clinics, which was Illinois Search and Research, they called it. And the doctor there told me he would probably outgrow it. And that was the last. He was having speech therapy in school and what have you. But I noticed that anything he memorized, he could give that back to you perfectly. And that's when I started having him memorize this, that, and the other.
Okay, why don't you get a clip?
Now let's be honest, we can never truly understand the mindset of Mamie Till, the things that she went through, the events or whatnot. So I want you to put yourself in her place. What special message would you give the monsters that took her child from her?